This video is a beginner's guide to sculpting in Blender. We'll go through the very basics about how you can start off, use the brushes, the different settings, and by the end of it you'll come up with something similar to this. Results of course may vary depending on your sculpting ability. That does take time and practice, but you'll have all the technical skills to be able to do this, and I will guide you a little bit in terms of the anatomy and where to sculpt and how. Do check out the links in the description to my sculpting playlist. There's lots of details on there about how you can light and render your sculpts. There's lots of advanced tips on there, and there's lots of practice sessions to go through so you can practice and get good at sculpting. And just before I start, you can see my setup here. I've got a graphics display tablet. That means I can use my pen and draw on the screen and move about my objects like this. It certainly does make it a lot easier, but they can be a bit expensive. If you need to go for a cheaper version, you can get a graphics tablet like this and you just draw on here. The difficulty with this is that you have to kind of look up at the screen rather than look down on your paper, as it were. Graphics tablets and display tablets certainly make it a lot easier to sculpt and quicker, but you can get similar-ish results with a mouse. It just takes longer and it is a bit harder. If you want a buyer's guide to this, then check out the link in the description, but I would suggest starting off with a mouse, see how you get on, and see whether it's something you enjoy. If you do enjoy it, then upgrade to something like this. If you really enjoy it, then upgrade to something like this. Lastly, if you do have a graphics tablet, the only thing you need to set up, as it were, is the pen button. The single pen button here, change that to a middle mouse button, then you can move around your sculpts really easily. Then if you have your keyboard close by, you don't really need to set up or change anything else. So let's start creating our goblin head together. If this tutorial is a little bit complex, then do check out my complete beginner's guide to Blender. It's a little bit more catered to people that have opened the program for the first time. So when you first open Blender, you'll see the splash screen. I'm using Blender 4.4. For an earlier version of this tutorial, there's a link in the description. Now on the side here where it says new file, you'll see there's a sculpting workspace. Now don't follow along with this, but if I click on that, you'll see it takes me straight into the sculpting workspace. I've got a sphere here where I can start sculpting. However, it can be a touch confusing because you've lost some of the other workspaces you normally see at the top. So instead of doing that, on the splash screen, choose the general file. Now you'll see my screencast keys down the corner here, and currently we're in the layout workspace. And we'll be jumping between the layout workspace and the sculpting workspace within this tutorial. Now, quick reminder of the controls: middle mouse button is to move around your scene, hence why I program my pen button to middle mouse button. Your wheel of your mouse is to zoom in and out, and if you hold down Shift and middle mouse button, you can move side to side. If you kind of get stuck and you're zooming around a point that's over here, let's say, you can easily frame your object with the period key on your numpad. That's under the View menu here, Frame Selected. You can also frame all, which is the Home key, and that frames everything in your scene. So with my cube selected, I can press the period key on my numpad and zoom into that, and it's nicely centered. Also, something that's very useful is the Cartesian coordinates over here. You can actually click on these and move around like so. Take note of the colors. You can see the x-axis is in red, and that's going across our scene here, the y in green, and the z or z-axis, as I would say, is up and down, and that's in blue, but we don't see it in our scene. It's also worth noting that the -y is at the front. You can actually click on the letters and it takes you to that view if you ever need to go to side view or front view. Middle mouse button will take you out of that orthographic view, which is good for lining things up, but we don't use it so much in sculpting. The main thing to remember is to have your x-axis going across like this, and the -y is the front. That will be important for when we work with symmetry when we're sculpting. Now, I want to go into sculpt mode, but the default cube is not very good for sculpting because it's not got many polygons. What sculpting is doing is moving around these vertices by pushing them in or pulling them out. So obviously we need a lot more than this to add detail. So I'll delete the default cube, go up to the Add menu here, under Mesh, choose Icosphere. That's given us a few more, and we've got a ball as well, which is a little bit easier for a starting point for a head. If I come down to the bottom here with the dialog box, I can open it up with the disclosure arrow just there, and turn the subdivisions up to something like 4. Now we've got a fairly detailed ball just in the middle there, and we're ready for sculpting. So we can go across to the sculpting workspace. Before I do that, do note that I've got my icosphere selected, and it's currently in object mode. That's useful for moving it around. But if I go to the sculpting workspace, notice it changes it across to sculpt mode just here. And we've got lots of brushes down the bottom here, tools down the side, and some properties of our brushes over on the right-hand side, most of which you can see at the top here as well. Now I've got a few extra brushes. I'm just going to get rid of those by coming across to my libraries here and change it to Essentials. You can click and drag and bring your brushes up. so you can see more of them. We'll be just using these top 2 rows here. So I'll bring that back down so it's just 2 rows. You can make the icons bigger just here, and you can tick the names as well so you can see exactly which brush you're using. So as a beginner, this is a nice setup. However, as you become more advanced, you can clear these brushes out the way and press Shift Spacebar to bring up the brush panel, which you can see here. And I can press Escape to get rid of that. So you might want your brushes down the bottom, but I'll press Shift Spacebar to bring up the brushes for myself. Currently, I'm on the Draw brush, and I'll press Escape, and you can see I can draw on my object. But it's still not particularly detailed. Don't worry about that because we'll be able to add more detail later on. I'll undo those changes because I want to show you that you can turn on symmetry up the top here. If I click that, you can see I've got a blue dot the other side of the sphere now, and when I start drawing, it will draw on the other side as well. And that's obviously useful for symmetrical objects. Again, I'll undo those changes. If you want to resize the brush, you press F, and I can make my brush nice and big, like so. I'll undo that again, and I'll bring it back down with F. To draw, you just left click, or with a graphics tablet, you press your pen against the screen. If I hold down Control while doing this, you can see that it digs in instead of pulling outwards. So holding Control does the reverse of the normal state of the brush. And you can see the direction of the brush you've got selected just here. So Add is the draw brush by default, and I'm moving out. Holding down Control turns it to Subtract. You'll notice there's also a strength just there. You can press Shift F to change the strength. So if I bring that right out to 1, you can see it changed just there, and it's having much more of an influence. I'll undo those steps just there and press Shift F and bring it back to 0.5, roughly anyway. So let's start doing some sculpting. I'll press Shift Spacebar. Remember that brings up my brushes. Incidentally, if you can't see many brushes, you might have accidentally pressed the spacebar again, and that's actually added a space in the search bar. So if I close that down, you can see it brings all the brushes back. Probably the best brush for starting your shape is the grab brush just here. This is a great brush for grabbing large parts of the shape and pulling them into position, which makes it a good brush for getting your basic shape. And that's the first thing we'll need to do, is get our basic shape before we add any detail. So we'll start with the grab brush. So I'll select that. I'll resize my brush so it's nice and big. And I'll come around to the front here. You can see it's the front because the dots are getting close together, and I'm on the -Y just here. So at the front, I'm going to come fairly close to the middle and click and drag. So I'm pulling the front of the face down. So it's fairly directly down like this. Remember, middle mouse button to move around. And I'll just move that back a little bit so it's nice and flat. Okay, so round to the front like so, and I'll bring the sides in. So I'm actually pressing outside the shape and then pulling it inwards like so. And I'm doing that with the front of the face. The back of the face is slightly wider. And we've probably got a fairly good setup there. Now notice it's stretching my mesh slightly. So these polygons up here are slightly different and less stretched than these ones in the middle here. I'll exaggerate that by pulling out a neck, so I'll just make my brush a little bit smaller. Again, coming into the middle, roughly around there where my points are close together, and just sort of pull this bit down like so. Bring this bit up a little bit, pull this down. So we've got a sort of neck shape like this. I'll come around to the middle, and you can see I need to move around my object regularly to check that it's doing the same from the front as it is the sides, and then the back as well. Come across like so. So we've got a neck there, but again, it's very, very stretched. It's very difficult to work on a stretched mesh like this. You can see it distorts every time I pull it around, and it's not very smooth. Incidentally, notice the angle of the neck. It's not going straight down, it's going at a slight angle. The head is slightly forward from the body. And this allows me to show you the smooth brush. If you hold down Shift, that will take you to the smooth brush, and then you can smooth out like so. I'll undo that because I actually want to keep the shape. But notice when I smooth out there, the difference to when I smooth out up the top here, so holding down Shift, smoothing out, it has much less of an effect. It has pulled it in slightly, as you can see there, but not so much as it pulls it in here. I'll undo those edits. So the further your vertices are from each other, the more influence the smooth has, as it equalizes the distance between all the vertices. So having stretched polygons like this isn't working for us. So how do we sort that out? Well, we've got what's called the remesh option up the top here. If I click on that, you can see the remesh options. Voxel size and remesh are the most important. Incidentally, you can also see that in your brush settings. Down the bottom here, remesh, and you've got the same options there. I'll scroll back up though and choose the Remesh menu. Now the voxel size is the size of the faces it's going to create, and the Remesh button is the command to remesh. And you'll notice there's a shortcut, Control R for remesh. If I move my mouse away from the menu now and press R, that will take me to the Remesh voxel size, which is a bit clearer because this is the size of the polygons that are going to be created. So if I leave it at 0.1 and press Escape, and then press Control R to remesh, look what's happened to my mesh. It's changed my shape, so the polygon sizes are roughly the equivalent, if I press R again, of the sizes you see here. So it's really helpful to see the actual polygon size. If I move my mouse side to side, you can see I can bring down that polygon size to maybe something like 0.04 and right click around there. And again, Control R, you can see I've got a more detailed mesh now. And notice when I hold down Shift and start smoothing out, it's not quite as powerful, but it certainly looks a lot better. So I've got a really basic shape. I might just pull out the front here so it's got a bit more of a bust rather than just a neck. Squish in just a bit there. Come around to the back, pull out a bit there, maybe make my brush a bit bigger, just so we've got a little bit more of a neck there. Again, notice the neck doesn't come straight down, it does come outwards slightly like this. Okay, so still on the grab brush with our slightly more detailed mesh. Incidentally, it might be worth noting that if you go up to the overlays and turn on statistics, you can actually see the amount of faces on your model. So I've got 16,000 at the moment. It's a very low poly model in terms of sculpting anyway. I'm going to bring down my brush and start making some detail. So I'll come around to the front slightly and notice my yellow dots again. Probably around there is where I want to just pull in really slightly so I can kind of see a little bit of a dent, and I can come around to the side, get that spot a bit closer and pull in for the eyes. Now I'm looking for halfway up the mesh. I'll just come a little bit lower and pull in from there. So halfway from chin to top of the head there. It's quite a big eye socket at the moment, but I'll bring that back like so. And then I'll probably need to squish in this way for the nose. So we've got a big eye socket there, and then I can bring down a brow line like this. That's why I went a little bit higher. So there's the eye sockets again in the middle of the head here. Might possibly be a bit low now, so I'll just bring those up very slightly. So there's the eyes. Now be careful, you don't want to make a really flat shape at the front here. So try and bring your face around a little bit so it's more rounded. There's more of a cylindrical shape like this, not flat across the front. Okay, so that's a good starting point. We can bring out the nose now. Again, I'm trying to get my points close together. That's the symmetry there. And I'm getting my points really close together and pulling it out this way. Might be a bit too far, but we'll see how we go. We can always pull it back in and push up like that, pull the end down, and we've got a basic nose, which I need to kind of squish in this way, like so. And we've already got the startings of a face. Okay, let's work on the jaw. The jaw should come up to about here, about halfway. So we need to kind of bring this out a little bit. A nice solid jawline, going up to about halfway, just about there. And you can be relatively rough with this. Don't panic if it's not precisely halfway. Don't get out your ruler or anything. I'm just going to solidify that jaw a bit, come around to the front and see what we've got. Maybe I'll bring the cheeks in a little bit, make them slightly more gaunt and more interesting. Bring those cheekbones a bit higher as well, like this. And we got a weird looking goblin. I'll just zoom in a bit and widen those out a bit. So squishing those out like so. Bring this bit back in a little bit more for the nose. A little bit wider for the cheekbones. It's got a nice socket around the eye and then the cheekbones there. Okay, we're slowly getting there. Let's think about the mouth now. Now notice we've got this sort of cylindrical shape just here. That's what we want. We want a little bit of space for the mouth, so pull it out just a touch. And a little bit of a slope downwards for a normal human anyway. It depends what sort of character. You can have a bit of a caricature type with a longer chin like this. And maybe a pointy chin, that's entirely up to you. Or if it's, let's say, an ordinary human being, it might slope backwards this way slightly. I'll go this way so it's nice and flat, a little bit more caricature, less pointy though, a little bit wider and bulky like so. I've also got a bit extra space for the chin. I want to have them quite a broad goblin style chin, so it is a bit stylized. If you want more details on getting a human head correct, then do look at my sculpting playlist and the link in the description. But for now, you can test things out and have a bit of fun. Okay, so I've got a space for the mouth just there, and I'm ready, I think, for a little bit more detail. But before we add that extra level of detail, it would be really helpful to have some eyeballs in there so we can kind of draw around them and build up the eyelids and things. For this, it's easiest to go back to the layout workspace because that takes you back to object mode. I can press Shift and right click to move my 3D cursor to the eye socket, probably a little bit further out this way. It doesn't matter too much because you can easily move the object. And then Shift A is to add, or you can go to the add menu again, mesh, and then a UV sphere is probably best for this. You can see that's a bit big, so I'll scale it down. And I'll come to front view with 1 on my numpad, or use the -y Cartesian coordinate there. A little bit big, so I'll scale it down, and G to move it across very slightly. We're in orthographic view and it always looks a little bit distorted like this. If you want to know the exact size of the eyes, then again, look at my human head tutorial. But as we're doing a stylized shape, you can just add an eyeball in and roughly get it the same as mine if you're following along precisely. I'll come around to side view, G to grab, and then Y to constrain it to the Y axis. Bring it backwards, and we just want a little bit of space, maybe half an eyeball between the edge of the nose and the eye itself. Somewhere around about there. Okay, so I've got my eye in place, but I want to copy it to the other side. Nice easy way to do this, you can use a mirror modifier. So with my sphere selected, so it's highlighted a yellowy orange, come across to the modifiers here, add modifier, and you can start typing in mirror. And then I can select the mirror. It's mirroring along the x-axis, which is the red, so that's good, but it's just mirroring around its object origin, which is that yellow dot in the middle there. I want it to mirror around the object origin of the head, or the icosphere. So I can use the pipette I've selected just here, select the icosphere, and you can see it jumps to the other side because it's using the head's object origin, which is just there. So along the x-axis, mirroring around that origin point there. So assuming that you've still got your spheres selected, if I go to the sculpting workspace now and try to sculpt, you'll notice nothing's happening. I am in sculpt mode up the top here, but watch what happens when I start sculpting the spheres. Obviously, I've accidentally jumped into the sculpting workspace with the spheres selected rather than the head. So I'll undo those changes I just made. You can easily jump between objects by pressing Alt then Q whilst hovering over the shape you want to change to. So Alt Q, and you see the head highlighted red there, and we've now got the icosphere selected, and I can sculpt on that now. So if I press Alt Q on the eyeballs and Alt Q again on the head, you can see it jumping between the two. Okay, so I need to add a bit of detail in order to add some eyelids and things. So I can press R for my remesh options and bring this down a little bit further, so maybe 0.02, roughly around there anyway. And then press Ctrl R to remesh. Again, you can see the size of the voxels changing there. And now it's time for a new brush. So Shift Spacebar. The draw brush is nice and easy for this, or the clay strips. Either of those will work well. The clay strips is slightly different because it's a strip rather than a blob, and lots of artists prefer to use this. It creates a bit more texture. But if you're happy with the draw brush, you'll get a very similar result really. So I'll bring my brush down a bit, round to the front slightly. Remember Control to dig in, so I can dig in a little bit there, to sort of make the eye socket a little bit more prominent. It looks like I need to bring my eyes closer together. It's always tough when you're in orthographic view to get that right. Now I can jump to object mode here, select on my spheres and press G to grab in the x-axis and bring those over slightly. Let's just check they're in the right spot now. They're a bit big as well actually, so I'll scale those in a bit. Actually maybe still looks a tiny bit big. It doesn't matter too much, but for this character I think he wants smaller eyes, so I'll scale them in a bit. So if you're following along with me precisely, somewhere around there is what we're looking at. Doesn't matter too much though. Okay, select on the head again, cross to sculpt mode, and then I can start sculpting in some eyelids. So I'll bring the size of my brush down and sculpt in some eyelids like this. And then at the bottom as well. And we've got some very, very, very basic eyelids. I'll sculpt a bit of depth in there. So holding down Control and holding down Control at the bottom here. So we've sort of got some eyelids there. Very rough at the moment. Don't panic if it looks a bit weird like mine does. Okay, let's show you another brush. So Control Spacebar. This time I'm going to show you the Crease Polish brush. It's similar to the Crease Sharp, but just less powerful. The Crease Polish is better for beginners, I would say. And this brush is for creasing your mesh. So it's really good for adding details. So I'll use that. And this one actually digs in. So you can see if I use it there, it's digging in. And I'm bringing this down a little bit to the corner here, not the middle, but the corner. And it's digging in and squishing the mesh together. So it's digging in over here as well. If I hold down Control for this one, you can see that it brings out the eyelids by pinching them, but still kind of squishing the mesh together and pinching it in. If you get any anomalies like this, then use your smooth brush to smooth out. Okay, so that's sort of working, but I can go back to the grab brush. The shortcut for the grab brush is G, and just edit the shape very slightly, somewhere around here. And one thing that I've forgotten to do, which I'll do in a second, I'll just bring this eyelid up to the top there. So it goes from bottom corner to top corner in a way like this. I'll just squish that in a bit more over here. One thing I've forgotten to do is the icosphere. Helps if you rotate that. So I'm going to jump to the icosphere. So I'm going to go to object mode. There's a quick way to do this. Control tab, and I can move across to object mode. Select the UV sphere, and then RX90. That rotates the UV sphere around so we can see the top of it, and it looks a bit more like an eyeball. So they look a bit more like eyes now. And I think they might be a tiny bit big. I'll just scale them down while I'm here. Yeah, that's a bit more like it. So I'll select my head again. You can rename it as well. If you double click on this, you can call it head. That would be easier than calling it icosphere and getting confused with the UV spheres. Control tab, down to sculpt mode like so. And now I can start playing with the brow line and bring that down so it's a bit meaner like this. Oh yes, it's more fun, isn't it? Maybe squish in the nose a little bit more now. Now we've got a bit more detail on our mesh. Squish it up a bit more like this. Bring this bit in, this bit in. Remember, a bit of a bump for the mouth. And we're looking good, I would say. Let's bring that down a little bit. Bring this one up slightly. A few little adjustments, and you can smooth out if you need to. So we're roughly getting there. Let's go back to our crease brush. So Shift Spacebar, back to the crease polish. Bring my brush down a bit more. And let's work on the mouth. So just slightly higher than the middle. I'll do a U just here like this. So a little U, and then bring it down. So I'm actually creating an M shape like so. And that's roughly a mouth, as you can see there. So remember, the crease polish is pushing the mesh in, but squishing it together as well. Now, if I press Ctrl R to do a remesh, you can see it tidies that up a little bit, but we lose a little bit of detail in the eyelids there. Don't panic about that. We can come back and tidy it up a bit later. But now, when I use the crease polish again, it digs it in that bit further. And you can also hold down Control, and that will sharpen just the top of the lips like this, and the bottom just here, in the center of the lips. Don't do it so much on the sides, as they tend to be a bit more soft. Then underneath the lips, just above the chin, we've got a bit of a semicircle going on here. I'm digging in a fair bit, and then I'll smooth out in just a moment. I'm just kind of refining the shape, and then Shift to smooth that out. And let's refine the nose so it's actually got some nostrils. So just like this, underneath like so. And then the fulcrum, I think it's called, out there. Not too much. Shift if you need to smooth things out. And we've got a very basic shape of a face there. Now I'm just going to move around, check that I'm roughly in the right position. The eyes look very indented there. So I'm just going to edit those slightly. So Shift Spacebar, back to the grab brush, just in the middle there. Resize my brush and just bring those out very slightly. Obviously that's pulling them away from the spheres, but we can bring those out again in a second. And I'm just going to very slightly adjust my head shape a bit. Obviously you can look at references and get your head shape how you want it. These bits can be a little bit tough to teach as you take a bit of practice to get there, and look at a few references to help you out to get the proportions that you want. The focus of this tutorial is more about the tools, so just go a bit stylized and have some fun. There we go. Control Tab to go to object mode. Choose my spheres from up in the outliner, and then G then Y. Move those forwards until we can see them. And I've just got to do a little bit of adjustment with my head. So choose the head, Control Tab, back to sculpt mode, and I can bring this out slightly here. There we go, just those bit back so we can see the eyelid just there. A little bit of adjustment, this bit especially. Make my brush a bit smaller and edit this shape. Top eyelid does overlap this sort of irisy bit like this. The bottom eyelid slightly less so. So probably round about there anyway. Not too bad. Okay, let's put in some ears. So I'll just bring my brush a little bit smaller and just pull out a little bit there. So it's back from the edge of the jawline there. And it's just behind that. So somewhere around here, I want to pull out an ear. I always kind of mark the area like this from the side. Then when I go around to the front of the face, it's kind of easier to pull it out because you've got that sort of marker. Now there's a slightly better brush than the grab brush for this. So shift spacebar. The snake hook tool is great fun. It's like a super grab brush where you can really pull the mesh around and it kind of twists as you pull it at the same time. So I'll come around to the side. Now I've made a little bit of a protrusion. I can kind of find that spot a little bit easier and then pull out here. And in terms of height, the ear starts at the base of the nose and moves up to the eye, the middle of the eye that is. So I can bring out some ears like so, maybe make them a bit bigger here, a bit bigger here. Notice how it's stretching, so Control R to do a remesh. Use my smooth brush to smooth that out because it looks a little bit weird. Just tidy this up a little bit. Still using the snake hook tool. It's like the grab brush, but more powerful. Squish that in there. Maybe some earlobes like so. I feel like it doesn't look mean enough at the moment. I'm going to give him a bit more of a jawline. Perhaps not with the snake hook tool. The grab brush would be better for that. So Control spacebar. Get rid of my extra spaces. Grab brush. And let's give a more prominent jaw. Maybe even exaggerate this so it comes out like so. That's a bit more mean, isn't it? Oh, I like that. Maybe even more prominent. So using F to resize the brush. Almost looks regal, that expression. A bit more aggressive, so the brow line comes down a bit more like so. Oh yes, that's fun, isn't it? I think I need a bit more of a brow as well. I'll do that in a second. But we're having a lot of fun here now. Characters coming together. So let's squish this ear around. And I want to make a bit of a dent in there, so shift spacebar. The draw brush probably nice and easy for this. Let's press Control R, do a remesh quickly, so we've got the right amount of polygons, and then hold down Control, dig in here. So we've got some sort of ears, and I can dig right in there, and then have a sort of weird bit of skin sticking out there, maybe an earlobe there. Control R once again, just smooth out around here. And there we got an interesting looking character, haven't we? G will take you to the grab brush, it's a shortcut, and I can just sort of adapt the shape very slightly. Might make a few adjustments just to make him look more interesting. And this character's certainly coming on nicely. Just pull these sections into the ear a little bit and then across the crease brush. So shift spacebar, crease polish, and let's start tidying up the areas around the ear. So a combination of the crease brush to sort of refine it, but the grab brush kind of pulls it around more. And let's go to the draw brush quickly. So shift spacebar, draw. And let's make some nostrils. So again, holding down Control, make some nostrils there. So here I'm not just pressing once, I'm releasing my mouse, or my tablet I should say, and then pressing again to draw again. So you do it in stages. It doesn't look too bad, but it needs a bit of refining. But I think we're at a point now where we can add a bit more detail. So we've got 80,000 faces currently. Now before going further than, let's say 100,000 faces, so I'm on 80 at the moment, you really want to make sure that you've got the shape correct, because it gets more difficult to grab and move things around the more detail you add. So if I start adding, let's say, some wrinkles in here, and I then want to move it around, if I go to the grab brush, pull them around, I can distort those wrinkles. So try and get the shape right first. For that sake, I'll just go across to the grab brush and let's sort out the neck a little bit, make this sort of bust a bit broader. So it's going to be a bit more of a warrior goblin than something else. Slightly broader neck, like so. Quickly across to the crease brush and just a line down like this. That's the easy way to do that. There's kind of a muscle that goes down the side of the neck there. I'll jump across to the clay strips and add in a kind of throat around here. Again, you can just copy me roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is only the bust and it's not seen so much. A little bit of a dent just next to the neck there. I'll just be relatively quick here because I don't want to overcomplicate things and make it a more detailed sculpt. It's just for fun and learning the tools. So I'm just grabbing and pulling things around, so make sure you get the shape before you move on to the detailed section. You may not even have a neck on your model, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so I need to add a bit of detail. So again, zoom in a little bit, because when I press R, then I'll see the size of my voxels a bit clearer. And I'm going to go to just under 0.01, somewhere around there, Control R, and we're up to 500,000 faces. So we're going to do more of a detailed sculpt now. Most computers should be able to handle this. If yours is lagging at all, then you might need to bring it down slightly, especially if you're on a laptop. Now, when we get to the detailed section, I tend to use the crease polish brush an awful lot. So I'll jump across to that, and let's add some creases in for the brow. Let's refine the eyes. Let's go down to a bit of a V like that, really, the eyes. But again, smooth out a bit so it's not too elaborate. Let's go in and add a bit of detail to the eyelids. So again, crease polish brush, and I'm digging in to create the corners, but hold down Control to bring out the edge of the eyelid like this. Remember to smooth out by holding down Shift. I'll dig in here again to make the corner of the eye. Hold down Control to sharpen up the eyelids. So hopefully with a bit of practice, you should be able to get similar sort of results and learn this kind of technique. So a little bit smarter there for the eyes, and Control R to remesh to kind of make sure that I haven't distorted the mesh too much. Go to the grab brush if you need to kind of adjust it slightly. And once I've got the grab brush, let's work on the nose a little bit. And I'll just put it around, squish it in. Again, look at your references, if you've got some references, just to see what noses look like. And I'll distort this a little bit so it looks a bit more like a goblin nose. Although who really knows what a goblin nose looks like? Something like this, I reckon. That's more fun, isn't it? Back to the crease brush. The crease polish is Shift-C, the shortcut for that, if you want to jump between them. And let's start adding some wrinkles coming down here. Actually make my brush a little bit bigger there. And again, smooth out so it doesn't look too bulbous. Just add a little bit of depth in here, so a little bit more gaunt. More of a crease for the lips. Hold down Shift, smooth out. And then to sharpen those up, hold down Control with the crease brush. And you can see we've got some lips there. Try not to make them stick out too much. If you need to add a little bit of volume to them, then Shift Spacebar, across to the draw brush, but very light here. Just add a little bit more volume like so. And you might want to smooth out to even that out a bit. I might just hold down Control to make this a little bit less prominent, and then smooth out. A little bit of bulk around the mouth there. Don't need to go this detailed really, but I'm just doing what I do, I guess. A little bit more bulk around the brow. Make them look a bit more aggressive. Smooth out a bit as well there. And this again is with the draw brush. I'll smooth out a bit. Now we've got a little bit more detail. The smoothing is really making the skin look smooth, and that's with just under 500,000 faces. Back to the crease brush with Shift-C. Make my brush a bit smaller now. Make the end of the nose a bit more round like this. Maybe put a little bit of crease in there. Hold down Control and make the nose a little bit more solid. Smooth out if you need to. Hold down Control to get the edge of the nostril like this. It's getting a little bit distorted, but you can just smooth out if you need to. And then let's refine the nostril around here. Might have to press Control R to do a remesh to kind of tidy this up. Again, you do lose a little bit of detail. You have to tidy up these areas, but I'll do that in a moment. Just going to go to the grab brush, and I feel like this is just a little bit in the wrong place. Just a few minor adjustments around the place, pushing and pulling things around until I'm happy. Again, I'm looking at a few references and adjusting accordingly. I'm trying to give them a slightly aggressive look as well. Bit of smoothing on the top of the head there. Bit of smoothing around here as well. And the ear. Bit of smoothing at the back, just to take out some of those blobs. And they're looking quite interesting. Back to the crease brush, and let's really start going to town now. Let's just start doing a little bit of refinement, and then I'll tidy up a bit more in a moment. Now, my camera center is kind of behind the head at the moment. If you hold down Alt and middle click, that will kind of recenter your camera around the point that you click on. Makes life a lot easier. Just going to create a few creases. Again, I'm looking at my references for this of old people and what they might look like with creases. Gives them a bit more character. With the crease brush, I sort of wobble my mouse around to make a bit more of a dent just there. Just smooth this area out. Might have a bit more of an indentation. Yep, that works nicely. The mouth looks a bit more protruded there. A few more creases around the brow. Maybe a bit of a frown line up here. Hold down Control to bring some out as well. Smooth those out. Just a bit of lumpiness on the brow, really. A few more creases around here. Almost there. I'm just doing a few minor adjustments. Again, adding a little bit of character, a few creases in there, mainly using the crease brush for this. It is okay to go back to the grab brush. Here I'm just adjusting the nostrils slightly. They seem slightly out and I wanted a bit more sort of flariness to them. So I pushed them up a bit with the grab brush, but only make minor adjustments at this point. You should really have done all your big adjustments earlier on. Here I add a little bit of bulk with the draw brush and I jump between that and the crease polish for those creases. Remember, if you want to sharpen things up, hold down Control with the crease brush. It's really nice to sharpen areas up. And you can go really stylized if you want, so you can get some really sort of sharp edges if you want to. Where there's a little bit of blobbiness, you might just want to smooth out. And then again, this is with the crease brush. Smooth out and then crease again in those areas. A combination of the smooth brush like that and the crease brush can work really well. So in here I crease, smooth, crease, smooth, and you get nice smooth lines. And there we have it. Fun looking goblin. One last thing that lots of people like to do, if I go back to layout mode, click on the eyes, some people like to get that middle vertex, G then Y, move that in a little bit, and it kind of adds that extra oomph to the eyeballs basically. You have to be a little bit careful that it doesn't move in to your mesh though. G then Y, you can see the actual mesh of my character coming through there, so you might have to do a bit of extra digging in, sculpting just here if you need to tidy the eyes up. But that's one option for you anyway. So just turn the overlays off so you can kind of see the character more easily, and there he is. Looking pretty aggressive and angry. And here's what they look like with a bit of texturing and lighting. It's very simple what I've done here, and you can learn more about that in the links in the description in the sculpting playlist. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.